Before we get started with our next presentations, which are all part of the Disney realm, we're going to take a brief commercial break. Please welcome this year's Thea Committee Chairman Adam Bizark and Lisa, who's taking over at midnight tomorrow night for a very brief announcement about winning your Thea Award next year.
Wow, holy cow, look how many people are here. You realize this is by far the biggest group we've ever had for this. The Thea Awards have taken off in the last few years and have become such an incredible force that you guys get to see projects from around the world that blow our minds. And this is sort of, for us, the most exciting day of our year. What you're seeing is the culmination of 2 or 3 months of work by a committee of 22 industry legends and chumps like us who meet for months every year to review the literally hundreds of submissions that come in for amazing projects from around the world.
If any of the awards nominating committee is here, we would love it if you would stand and be recognized for your work and your efforts. So if you are here, and I know we're...
Thea committee members, are you here?
Yeah.
Phil gets to stand up because he's about to become a member again. The Thea Awards Committee consists of every single available member who has ever won the Buzz Price Lifetime Achievement Award, so that it will include Phil Hedema going forward from here. It includes Joe Rohde, who we just saw in the room, and all the other amazing Lifetime Achievement members, plus about 9 and soon 12, because we've got so many submissions coming in, 12 members from the TEA at large, and we meet every year to review the increasing number of submissions that come in. And this year we had a record number of, I think, over 350 submissions for the 20 awards that have been selected, and it just keeps getting higher and higher every year.
So one of the other things we want to do is encourage you, because we think that people don't realize that you don't have to be involved in a project to nominate a project. So all of you are potential nominators for projects. If you're out in the world and you see a project and you think it is worthy of a Thea Award, please nominate it and get it in front of the awards nominating committee so that we can add it to our list of work to review. We would love that challenge.
And the nominations will be opening very soon. I think June or July 1st is the beginning of the nomination period. Look around, send us stuff, overwhelm us. We love it. We love seeing all this stuff and then getting to bring it back to all of you guys at this time of year. So thanks, and keep it coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Lisa. Great job this year. A lot of work is done by the committee for 6 weeks in order to come up with the nominations that go to the board of directors. But let's now get started for the rest of the afternoon before we let you go to cocktails somewhere in the neighborhood between 6:30 and 7 o'clock tonight, just depending. It's been a long time since the Maelstrom attraction opened at the Norway Pavilion at Epcot, 28 years precisely, completely repurposing the existing boat ride layout and using imaginative new storytelling. Frozen Ever After garners an AOA for attraction reimagining. Character animation throughout is imaginative, purposeful. There is a new generation of all-electric audio animatronic figures. Projection, special effects, scenic design, and a well-designed soundscape musical score are blended seamlessly to create a delightful and well-rendered three-dimensional world that surrounds guests floating through the world of Frozen. Here to give us the inside story on their projects are creative director from WDI, Michel Den Dulk, and WDI producer, Wyatt Winter. Gentlemen, please come to the stage. All yours.
All right, great. Hello, everybody. Yeah. Hope everybody's having a great and informative time today here. And we're very privileged, we feel very privileged that we can present to such an amazing crowd. You know, the best of the world all gathered in the one room. Quite amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're here to take you through a Frozen story, and hope you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. So we're going to jump back, as mentioned, and go back to 1988 when the Norway Pavilion originally opened at Epcot and World Showcase. And so since that time, it really had not been updated that much or changed a whole lot. And so there have been some discussions, thoughts of what could we do to enhance this pavilion? What could we add to it? And that got us thinking right around the time this movie started coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. So the Norway Pavilion, a beautiful pavilion in Epcot, part of World Showcase. And you know, you see some pictures here on the screen, the beautiful wood houses that they translated from Norway into the film. Now, in 2013, the summer 13, I was privileged to be invited to a screening of a new movie called Frozen. And I knew that the movie was in production. I also knew that it was based on a story of Hans Christian Andersen, the Snow Queen. And I saw, I had seen some concept art of, Queen Elsa, one of the main characters of the film. What I didn't know is that the design of the film is heavily grounded into Norwegian culture and Norwegian, design culture, architecture, costuming. So, knowing that there was a desire to revamp the Norway Pavilion and give it new life, and seeing this new movie in the works that clearly had Norwegian references in the design, kind of sparked the start of this project.
Yeah, and so right around that same time, again, you never know what's going to happen when a movie comes out. The movie just kept growing and growing and growing. I think we all can probably sing several of the songs, whether we want to or not. And so during that time, we needed to make sure that we were keeping up with those guests' expectations. As the movie grew and everyone knew about it, we wanted to make sure we continued with that. And what could we do to enhance this and take this even to another level, knowing that demand was going to be there once it opened up. So that led us to really think even a little bit more, and while we're here today to talk about Frozen Ever After, another half of this project was the Royal Sommerhus, which was located on kind of the other side of the pavilion and allowed us to just expand and create a larger Norway pavilion as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So this rendering kind of shows the project scale, if you will, that we ended up with. On the left-hand side is the Royal Sommerhus, that is our house where the guests can meet Anna and Elsa. The highlighted building there in the red circle is the entrance to Frozen Ever After. Now, this attraction is, of course, all about meeting the characters that everybody loves so much, but it is part of the Norway Pavilion. So we thought it was really important to show people that there is a new attraction that replaced the former attraction in this pavilion, but also show it on the outside, not only on the inside. But it was important to us to have that part of the project grounded in Norway more than it was in the film, so that it kind of makes a transition, the guest makes a transition from the Norway Pavilion into the world of the film. So in this slide, the next slide here, you see that we went actually to Norway. The film team went to Norway when they did the film and got all their inspiration. So we went kind of in their pathway that they created and went on all these different places in Norway and got inspiration for what our entrance could be. So the stone building you see there is Hakens Hall, and that was the main inspiration for the new entrance into Frozen Ever After. So it's more Norwegian looking and realistic looking on the outside, and then the further you go into the queue, the more you transition into a world that feels familiar, that people know from the film. With that, let's talk the inside of Frozen Ever After, the main attraction. So this is a very, very, very early hand-sketched plan of what the ride could be like. Now, one of the major challenges of doing this ride was that we inherited the existing ride system. So the ride dynamics of this attraction were already in place, and we had a film that we had to work with that had a story that had a story that we want to incorporate in the ride, and how do those match up together? So doing a linear story following the film didn't seem the right way to do that. And there's also a key element in the ride that is really important that we had to incorporate, and that is the switch. The switch is on the second floor of this ride, and boats go into the switch, then they turn, and then they're sent backwards. So what would we do with this scene, and how are we incorporating this story of Frozen on that? And we went on the ride and wrote it over and over and over and over again. And while writing it in work lights and show lights, we just discussed per scene, what could we do in the scene. And this scene is actually the scene with the switch, which in this next slide, we can kind of see a really rough thumbnail that we kind of did, on location. It's actually the first scene that we thought of. It's Elsa's, anthem, Let It Go, and it was placed on top of that scene where there is the ride switch. So, Let It Go, the song, of course, everybody in the world has heard that at least multiple times. And that just seemed to make a lot of sense to put that in that scene. It was, she sings Let It Go. What if we, have a beautiful animatronic of Elsa, and she would, make a hand gesture, sing Let It Go, and then send the guest backwards on this fun journey through her ice palace. But her song is, of course, all about her and her emotions, and sort of, struggling with those and getting confident at the end of the song. So we didn't want to change the song, but we changed one word, and that one word placed this scene into the happily ever after time frame that this ride was want to be sorry, my voice want to be placed in. So that word is share. So in the film, she sings, "It's time to see what I can do," and we changed that to "It's time to share what I can do." And that one word only placed this song in this new storyline that we wanted to present to the guests. Yeah. And that, ended up in a scene that looks like this. So the notion was we want to have this, awesome animatronic of Elsa, and how are we going to achieve that? How are we going to live up to the expectations that people will have seeing Elsa for the first time?
Yeah, so as we did that, we really wanted to work on this space, and knowing it was all about the motion of the boat, the kind of emotion of the song, and so wanted to work a lot on getting that right. So we did a lot of kind of virtual pre-staging on this scene, and so watch this. I'm gonna. Yeah. As we work through this scene, one of the things we wanted to do is test media and see what we could see in the space here, timing that with the animated figure, the boat motion, and get that all together. Big part of this with the attraction is we had constraints, as many projects do, with schedule and how are we going to kind of sequence the work. This allowed us to do a lot of our media work and some of that stuff out of the way ahead of time. So as we got into the field, we could then drop that in and do tweaks. We did a lot of our reviews with Disney Animation Studios this way, and with our own team as well, working through this scene and understanding the timing, the sequence, and all of that together. So that was kind of the overall scene with it together, but as we mentioned, it's all about Elsa in this scene and the all-electric animated audio animatronic figures. And so this here is a side-by-side video that shows our figure development process. On the left-hand side is the CG render that Walt Disney Animation Studios did with their animation on our rigs that we built together. It is then put into SolidWorks models that we can then animate, and then starting to build it and see that data played right on the figure. So it's all the same data running all three of those things together. And so we had done a lot of proof of concepts and testing. Thank you. So we knew this was really the center and heart of our show, and so a lot of time and effort put on with her. And also kind of that then developed into how do we do Anna figure and what do we do for Olaf and all of these, because again, we knew we needed to meet these expectations of our guests. And again, it led us to what we see today out in the attraction and kind of that whole experience that you see together and having that one seamless integrated environment.
Absolutely. So now that we had, the switches figured out and let it go, the most important scene of the film kind of placed in the ride, we could start designing the rest of the rides, actually. So we didn't start from the beginning. This ride was really, designed sort of like from the middle and then spreading out towards the end and towards the beginning. So again, we were trying to really keep up with the success of the film. Everybody thought this was going to be a great film, but that it was going to be so successful, I think was, still a surprise to many. So, billions of, of millions of people watching the film, it was, quite an extraordinary time. So we tried to, take that all in and think like, okay, how can we grow this experience sort of like within the limitations that we had to work with? Because we had the walls of the buildings, there were restaurants and shops connected to this building. There's all kinds of back of house places behind it. So it was really hard to kind of expand this experience. But we figured out a way, and that is where you see the circle. That used to be the load station of the ride. People would go into the ride and then into a queue that was located all in where the circle is, and then guests would enter the boats there and go on the ride. So this is what that used to look like. This is a portion of the queue, and you see a mural in the background. That was where people actually loaded into the boats and then carried on onto their journey. So we thought, okay, what if we reconfigure, the whole ground floor of this attraction and place things differently, and can we get more track into this ride and make the ride longer? And we ended up putting more track into this area and completely reconfigure our load and unload situation in this attraction and make this attraction a minute longer than the original was. So first ideas for that scene were really rough, based on, maybe you see Sven, the reindeer, and his buddy, Christoph, and they will sort of like introduce you to the rides. But that, at some point, didn't feel like the best opening possible. Again, the film was so successful, and the snowman, Olaf, you might have heard of him, really was a highlight of the film. So it felt right to use Olaf as our opening scene. And what if Olaf would walk towards the boat? Wouldn't that actually be neat to have Olaf walk towards us and walk with the boat? So we thought, that would be a real cool opening. And let's have him sing a song that he's not singing in the film. We really wanted to have a fresh approach on Frozen. So many people have seen it. So many people are familiar with it. But if you go on Frozen Ever After, you will notice that Olaf sings a song in multiple scenes that he's not singing in the film. And we gave him new lyrics that really fit Frozen Ever After. And that got us like a real fresh approach to something that everybody is familiar with.
Yep. So to do that, again, just like with Elsa, we knew Olaf was going to be our next kind of big thing to work on. He is not a big fellow, so we needed to figure out how to package and fit him all together. As part of this new process with animated figures, on the left here you will see kind of an older style of what we would do for character animation sheets, which would show maybe a head turn, a head nod of 15 degrees, 25 degrees, or whatever that might be. And then you would animate on top of that, and hopefully everything works and that you get all the motion you want out of it. What we shifted to was really working through and animating it all beforehand, so then we could design that rig and that figure to do those exact movements over and over and over and get what we want, the performance out of it that we wanted. And so we shifted to a little bit more on the right, where you see it just talks about, very small up there, just you have arm movements or head movements, but it was all about the digital rig and all of that beforehand. Just like Elsa then, What we would do is drop that into those physical models, all the SolidWorks models, and run that animation data on top of that and start to see what he could do and what he'd be capable of altogether. And so you can see him starting to hop. And so what guests see, obviously, is just him, but that huge machine is underneath that snowbank, hiding it and running that figure. The next piece that you then take that through is pushing it into, again, our virtual staging and really running that through sight lines. And we'll watch this one a bit.
Oh, we're going up to Elsa's ice palace. You and you and you, all of you. See you there.
So again, taking that with our timing that we knew and some of those locked things that we had, and let's start working with it, making sure he gets his eye lines looking to the guests, because a big part of all this was we wanted the characters to feel like they're engaging with the guests as they ride through this ride. So welcoming you in, that was a big part of Elsa's story. As we mentioned, she's sharing what she can do. We wanted that engagement between characters and our guests in this experience all together. So again, that led us to what we have is our final kind of view of Olaf in the scene here today, and what we got.
Right. So, we kind of talked about two major components of this attraction. We also wanted to share some views that show you the comparison between what was previously there and what is there now. So this shows the entry of the queue coming from outside from the Norway Pavilion and going deeper into the world of Frozen. You see the bottom left, obviously, what it looked like before. We added a couple of stones, and but we have an introduction poster kind of setting up the story of Frozen Ever After, what the ride is about, and then people go around the corner, and the world of Frozen kind of opens up in this beautiful square.
Yeah. As you get past that space and you walk into what is now our new queue, that used to be the old post-ride theater that you would watch a film about Norway. So we're able to take that whole space out, get a new queue where we had obviously lost the previous one to our new ride and show scenes. And you can kind of see these are about from the same angle, where the new yellow house facade is on the upper left is about where the old projection room used to be in that space. One of our is working with the existing facility, as I'm sure many of you understand, brings its own challenges and fun. Something that we had in there were two large steel columns that were basically holding up the building. We said we're not going to change those, let's work around it. And so if you go in there, you'll notice two of our buildings have chimneys. Those chimneys are hiding those structural columns. So again, we put those in there and worked everything in and around that. So those are some of the things that we really tried to change and push things where we could, but otherwise let's work with our existing parameters that we had in the space.
Let It Go, again, Elsa's anthem, the heart of the attraction, first scene that we figured out, and actually stayed consistent all the way through the end. Much around that scene changed over time during the process, but this scene stayed consistent. One of the things we did in the scene as well is putting a lot of fiber effects in it, and there's a fiber trail that kind of follows the boat when you're pushed backwards into the next scene. And that, in a way, is an homage to the previous rides. You can see in the lower left, there is a three-headed troll and then a fiber optic swirl that kind of appeared above these trolls when in the previous ride you were going backwards. So we thought it would be a nice homage and a kind of like wink to the old attraction if we would do a similar effect that would work still in the story, the new story that we came up with for this newer attraction.
I think we supposedly bought out the supply of US fiber, of that type of fiber, when we did this project. And so the guys said, like, this is all you get. So we did that one. And then a little further down, one of the other big scenes that we changed that affected both the outside and the inside was there used to be an opening from the front of the attraction where you could see the boats kind of peek out before you went down a drop. We wanted to close that up to really allow light control and control the scene. Because we had a nighttime setting, we didn't want the Florida sun, that opening faced kind of southwest, to disrupt that and have a consistent show. So we closed that up that you previously had, and we're able to put Marshmallow and his little Snow G friends in that space.
And last but not least, so like our return to the city of Arendelle. You know, in this ride, we travel through the forest and through the Valley of the Trolls. We go up towards Elsa's Ice Palace, but eventually we'll come down to Arendelle again, and we're greeted by Elsa's magical ice fireworks that's above her castle. A beautiful scene, very romantic and impressive in scale. To the right, in the corner, you see two little birds, two puffins, cute little puffins. Those are actually characters that were in the previous ride that we all thought were so cute that we gave him a new home, you know, viewing the fireworks over and over and over again. And that turned out pretty neat. So there's still a couple like hints to the previous ride.
Yep. Tried to do that. There's a couple other hidden Easter eggs and references to Maelstrom throughout the attraction and pavilion as a whole that we snuck in as well. So we included this one here because, as everyone knows, it takes an army of people to get any of these things done. And so this is just a fraction of our overall team. We joked that none of us wanted it too close because this was taken the morning we opened the attraction. And so we all were glad it was a long, far shot. But we were big team, as all these projects have a variety of people. And what was a little bit different with this one was predominantly done out of Florida for Imagineering. So this was Michelle and our media team were out here in California, but all of our kind of architects and engineering, construction, and graphics and all that were really done out of Florida, which had been kind of a little bit of a shift for this project. Mm-hmm. So with that, we hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Frozen Ever After.
All right.
So.
Thank you so much. Wow. Would you mind taking questions? We have 7 minutes left.
Yeah, glad
Excellent.
to.
Questions, please.
We might see
have a
one
question?
right over there.
Please stand up, name and company. Please.
Hello, Alexander Krikis. I'm a senior at the Savannah College of Art and Design. I just had a question sort of about the initial design intent for the ride. One of my former professors, George Head, worked on the original Maelstrom attraction, and one of his first projects he had us do in themed entertainment design was sort of a book report ride. And I find it sort of funny because he worked on Maelstrom, and then that exact project ended up being something that happened to Maelstrom. So my question is, Frozen Ever After is sort of a new take on the idea of a quote-unquote book report ride, where you're not necessarily telling the exact same elements that happened in the movie, but you're referencing them, and it's sort of like a story within a story. So was that the intention from the start, or did that sort of evolve naturally as you started the design process?
It happened from the start. To be honest, I think there was always a desire from us personally to not retell the movie exactly as it happens. Even if we didn't have a track partly already locked for us, you know, we always wanted to kind of make a fresh approach to this. The track already being in place partly, I think was the final, you know, step saying like, okay, this doesn't, you know, feel right to just tell the movie as it is. So I think what we come up with is a really fun family adventure that feels warm, that feels friendly, and also feels very repeatable. Whereas there's a lot of repeat guests in our parks, and I think you know, a ride like this, just you can ride it over and over and over because you don't really have to, you know, take in something at the start, remember that, and then get sort of a conclusion at the end. It's all just about, you know, a visual spectacle, you know, but nothing particular that you have to notice. But if you missed it, you kind of missed the clue. So that was really important for us. So I would say even if we didn't have a locked track, we would probably have preferred a story that's new and fresh and highly repeatable.
Yeah, and as we said, we agreed with everything that you just said. We wanted with Let It Go, we changed the one word, but that was also because we wanted Let It Go. We knew there were certain guest expectations. If you don't mess with that song, it's kind of the holy grail of the movie. So we needed to keep that, and that was one reason we didn't change much there and then play with the other stuff for that surprise.
Thank you. Another question? In the back, who has the microphone? Oh, there you go. Name and company, please.
Reagan Willman, Next Gen from Texas Tech. Because this ride is located in the Norway Pavilion, what measures did you take during the ride to make sure you highlighted the Norwegian culture and not just the frozen PI? Excuse me.
So, like you saw in the beginning of the presentation, we actually ended up with 2 projects here. So we have Frozen Ever After, and especially the entrance. So the entrance has, references to Norway. There's, I don't know if you saw it, but there's like a little figurine on the exterior that is a version of Kristoff and Sven, but it's done in such a way that it really refers to a wood-carved figure that is actually in the city of Bergen, or the area of Bryggen, which is a World Heritage Site in Norway. And there's a little wood-carved figure there of a man holding an axe, and we kind of like, that inspired us, and we created our own version. So there's like little hints of that in the ride, especially in the queue. There's definite references to Norway. We have some carved stone figureheads next to a couple of windows, again, that are a reference to Hakon's Hall, that also is in the city of Bergen. And then for the other attraction, the Royal Sommerhus, that especially had a very strong Norwegian component, where we found a beautiful house in Norway with beautiful wood-carved, very vibrant red-colored door that spoke to us, and we visited it, and we took a lot of reference from that, and then incorporated that in the Norway Pavilion, and actually created a 2 parts of the pavilion now. There is a urban part of the pavilion where Frozen Ever After is located. That's where like the castle architecture is, the city architecture, and then there's the Stave Church in the center. The Stave Church is a very typical Norwegian, sort of like Viking-like church building. And on the other side, there was an empty piece of property that wasn't used yet, and we built our meet and greet facility on that and created sort of like the countryside of Norway. So now we have the countryside of Norway represented, and we have an urban part.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, we were able to go actually to Norway and take almost the same trip that the Frozen film team did as well a couple years before that. And so I get to travel across, see these locations that inspired the movie, and actually see, especially like for like, what they saw, what inspired the movie, and then how we interpret that for our location. And so you can kind of do this full circle journey with it. And I joke that my most nervous I ever got with this project is when we had to present it to all the Norwegian cast members that would be running it, because that would be our biggest test, did we do the right job? And so I remember sitting in our conference room ready to present it, and kind of like all the executives, all the team members, everyone else was fine, but this was the one. And they kind of sat there thinking, I don't know, I'm not so sure. And they started laughing and getting excited, and they took ownership of it right away, and a lot of pride with it. So we felt that we kind of crossed that bar and able to do that. And they've even said with the Royal Sommerhus that it looks like their grandparents' house. So they recognize this piece, and so that made us feel really good about it.
Great, thank you. I know there's one question in the back on the left-hand side, please.
Yes,
Have
Nicola
about
Rossini,
49 seconds.
Universal Creative. Rehabbed ride, how did you deal with the new lenses towards access and mobility of the post-2012 era as opposed to when this attraction went in?
Yeah, so we really did use the existing ride system, which had certain protocols and systems set up into it. It was a big thing with the facility as well, of what could we do with walkways and egress paths, and we did have to adjust some things to meet current codes that had changed over time, and some things were just grandfathered in based on what we've done as well. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure we have time for another question because we're at that 7-second mark. So a huge thank you for our Frozen Ever After team. Thank you so much, Michelle and Wyatt.
Thank you.
Woo, well done.